No one wishes they worked more. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It truly helps the channel grow and continue to create contents like this. Midnight used to be my favorite hour, back when I was young enough to believe the day ended when I decided it did. I'd sit at a kitchen table with a yellow lamp, papers spread like a small city, budgets, schedules, proposals, my hands smelling faintly of ink and coffee. The house would be quiet in that special way that makes a person feel important. I told myself I was providing. I told myself I was building something. I told myself I was being responsible. Now, at 87, the quiet is different. It isn't the hush of a sleeping home. It's the hush of time after people have gone to bed for good. It's the quiet that comes when the phone doesn't ring much anymore, when the calendar has more blank squares than ink, when your body asks you to move slowly, like an old hinge that still works, but remembers every winter. And in that quiet, the truth has a way of walking in without knocking. No one wishes they worked more. I've heard that line said in hospital rooms and at kitchen tables like this one. I've heard it from men who wore their job titles like armor, and from women who could hold a household together with one hand and a career with the other. I've heard it from the ones who made a lot of money and the ones who scraped by. The details change, but the ending doesn't. We all arrive at the same place, eventually, and when we look back, the extra hours don't glitter the way we expected them to. I know the feeling of ambition. I can still taste it, like metal on the tongue. Ambition is hungry, and it's very convincing. It tells you, just a little more. Just one more deal. One more promotion. One more year of grinding and then you'll breathe. Then you'll take the trip. Then you'll slow down. Then you'll be present. Then you'll be the kind of person who sits on a porch and watches the sun lower itself into the trees. But ambition is a clever thief. It doesn't steal with a gun. It steals with a promise. When I was 42, I remember coming home late. My daughter was small, maybe 7, sitting on the living room carpet, hair in a loose mess, pajamas with little stars on them. She'd made a paper airplane and she wanted to show me how far it could fly. She looked up when the door opened, eyes bright like she'd been saving that moment all day. I kissed the top of her head and said, "Not tonight, sweetheart. Daddy's got a big day tomorrow." She nodded like she understood. Kids are generous that way. They forgive you because they don't know they're keeping score. She folded the airplane again, more carefully, as if precision could keep it from falling apart. Then she said, "Okay. Maybe tomorrow." Tomorrow. I can hear the word in her voice even now. Soft. Hopeful. Patient. Tomorrow came and went, and it came again and again. We did fly that airplane eventually. We did. I'm not saying I never showed up. I'm saying the moment she offered me, pure and simple, was a moment you can't recreate once it passes. It's like trying to step back into a river after the water has moved on. You can stand in the same place, but it isn't the same water. If you're listening and you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s, you might be thinking, "But I have to work. Bills don't pay themselves." Of course you do. I'm not telling you to quit your job and go live in a cabin. I'm not handing out fairy tales. I'm talking about something quieter and much harder, the way we let work become the default answer to every question. How do you prove you're worthy? Work harder. How do you avoid discomfort at home? Work longer. How do you feel in control of an uncertain world? Work more. How do you numb the fear that you're not enough? Work until you're too tired to think. The illusion is that more work equals more fulfillment. It's a simple equation, easy to sell. Put in hours, get meaning. Put in effort, get peace. Put in sacrifice, get love. But fulfillment isn't a paycheck. It doesn't deposit on Fridays. It grows in places that don't look impressive from a distance. It grows in slow dinners where people talk about nothing important and everything important at once. It grows in phone calls that aren't efficient. It grows in showing up when it's inconvenient. It grows in taking a walk without turning it into a productivity hack. It grows when you sit with someone you love and you don't try to optimize the moment. You just live it. When you're younger, you measure life in achievements. In older age, you measure life in absences. That's the cruel part. You don't realize what you're missing while you're missing it. I once sat with an old friend named Carl. He was 90, sharp as a tack, eyes like winter sky. He'd been a manager his whole life. A good one, too, the kind who knew everyone's kid's name, who remembered birthdays, who kept spare cash in his wallet for the guys who forgot lunch. He was proud of the work he did, and he should have been. But he said to me, "You know what I want back? Not the bonuses. Not the office. Not the applause. I want back my knees, for one thing." He laughed, but it caught in his throat. Then he said, "And I want back the mornings I missed." My boy would eat cereal at the counter, and I'd be halfway out the door, and he'd tell me some dream he had. I kept saying, "Tell me later." Later never came. He stopped telling me. That's the kind of regret that sits heavy. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just real. Like a stone in your pocket you didn't notice until you tried to run. Another time, years ago, I was in an airport, briefcase on my knee, tied too tight, watching the clock like it was a god. A woman sat across from me with a toddler asleep on her shoulder. The child's mouth was open a little, warm breath fogging the woman's collar. The mother's face was exhausted, yes, but it was soft with something I didn't understand back then. Not happiness exactly, something deeper. Like meeting that doesn't need permission. I remember feeling irritated. Can you believe that? Irritated at the sound of someone living. I wanted quiet so I could think about my next meeting. I wanted control. I wanted the world to behave like a spreadsheet. Now I would give anything to hear that small breath again. Not even from my own child, just as a reminder of what the world sounds like when it's still beginning. The trouble with work is that it rewards you quickly. You do something, you get a response. A compliment. A raise. A result. Relationships don't work like that. They're slow, and sometimes messy, and they don't come with performance reviews. Work will clap for you. People will say your name. They'll hang a plaque. They'll call you reliable. They'll ask you to mentor someone. They'll invite you to speak. It feels like proof. But the proof you want, the proof you'll crave at 80 is different. It's a hand in yours. It's someone who knows your stories and still chooses to sit beside you. It's laughter at the dinner table. It's a friend who drops by without an agenda. It's a grandson's voice asking you the same question 3 times because he loves the sound of your answer. Titles don't sit with you in the dark. Money can buy comfort, yes, and comfort matters. I won't pretend it doesn't. But comfort without connection is a room with a lock on the inside. Here's what happens, and I want to say it gently: one day your body changes. You can still be you on the inside, but the outside becomes a different vehicle. You move slower. You tire faster. You begin to make choices not based on ambition but on energy. And that's when you discover a terrifying thing: if you haven't invested in relationships, you can't purchase them later. You can't call your 20s back. You can't hire someone to go to your kid's recital for you. You can't outsource presents. You can't schedule love into a tighter calendar and expect it to show up on time. I'm not telling you to hate your work. Work can be beautiful. Work can be service. Work can be craft. Some of my proudest moments came from building something useful. But you have to know where the edges are. You have to know when work is no longer a tool and has become a religion. If you want a simple question to ask yourself, here it is: when your life is over, who will miss you, and why? Not who will say nice things at a funeral. People do that. I mean who will feel your absence in their daily rhythm. Who will reach for their phone and then remember they can't call. Who will sit at a kitchen table and feel the quiet change. That answer isn't built in a boardroom. It's built in small, repeated choices. It's built when you decide to go home. It's built when you leave your phone face down. It's built when you say, "I can do that tomorrow," to work, and you say, "I'm here," to the people who love you. If I could go back, I wouldn't erase my career. I would shrink it just enough to make room for the life that was waiting around it. I would take more walks. I would listen longer. I would sit on the floor and fly the paper airplane right then, even if my shirt wrinkled, even if my mind protested, even if the next day was big. Because here's the secret: the next day is always big until the days run out. And in the end, the scoreboard you think you're playing on fades away. The crowd leaves. The lights go off. What remains is the quiet truth, sitting with you like an old friend. No one wishes they worked more. What they wish is that they had lived more while they had the chance. So if you're in the thick of it right now, if your weeks feel like they're being shoveled into a furnace called success, try something tonight. Not a grand reinvention. Something small and almost embarrassingly simple. Pick one person you care about and give them a piece of time that can't be multitasked. 10 minutes with no phone, no email, no half listening while your mind runs ahead. Ask a real question. What's been on your mind lately? And stay long enough for the answer to breathe. And when work tugs at you, because it will, notice how it speaks. It usually speaks in urgency. It pretends everything is on fire. Most of it isn't. Most of it can wait until morning. Your life can't. Here's the secret I learned too late. The people who love you don't need you to be extraordinary. They need you to be available. They need you to look up. They need you to come home. Because the years don't announce themselves when they leave. They slip out like a guest at a crowded party. One day you look up and the rooms you once rushed through are suddenly quiet. That's when you'll want something to hold besides a resume. You'll want stories that smell like real life. In a moment, I'm going to tell you about the one conversation that finally broke through my stubbornness. How close I was to trading away the best parts of my life for things that would never love me back. And when I replay it now, I can still see the light in that hallway, and I can still hear my own footsteps, walking past what mattered most. That hallway was in our first house, the one with the creaky step near the middle that always betrayed you if you tried to sneak around at night. I'd come home late again, later than I'd promised, and I remember the air was warm with the smell of dish soap and something sweet my wife had baked for the kids. The television was off. The lights were low. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like I'd walked into a room where I didn't quite belong. My wife was sitting at the table with a mug of tea that had gone cold. She wasn't angry in the way people expect anger to look. No shouting, no slammed doors. She looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from carrying a life while someone you love keeps meaning to help. Someday, she said very calmly. Can I tell you something without you turning it into an argument? That sentence alone should have stopped me. But I was still wearing my work voice, confident, defensive, ready to negotiate. I said, Sure. She nodded toward the hallway. The kids fell asleep waiting for you. I started to explain. I had reasons. I always had reasons. Deadlines. A client. A last-minute call. A mistake someone else made that I had to fix. I could have built a whole bridge out of reasons and marched across it with my head held high. She let me talk for a few seconds, then lifted her hand, not dramatic, just a small gesture like she was turning down the volume. I know, she said. I know why. You're good at why. But I want you to hear what it costs. Then she said something I've never forgotten. She said, They're learning what love looks like by watching you. And right now, love looks like work. That's the kind of sentence that lands in your chest and doesn't leave. I tried to joke it off. I tried to soften it. I tried to argue with it. But you can't argue with a mirror. She stood up and walked down the hallway, and I followed, still clutching my briefcase like a shield. The door to my son's room was cracked open. The nightlight made a soft puddle on the floor. He was asleep in a strange position, one arm stretched toward the door as if he'd been reaching for me, and then, at some point, his body gave up and chose dreams instead. My wife whispered. He asked me if you loved him? I felt my throat tighten. Of course I do. He knows that in his head, she said. But he's starting to wonder if he can feel it. And then she did something that still makes me swallow hard even now. She stepped back and let me walk into that room alone. No rescue, no smoothing it over. Just me and the truth in the shape of a sleeping child. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched his chest rise and fall. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I should wake him up and tell him I loved him. But I didn't. I was afraid he'd blink at me, half awake, and say something that would break me clean in two. So I sat there like a man who'd finally arrived at the scene of his own life, late. That night wasn't a magical turning point where I quit my job and became a different person by sunrise. Real change isn't like that. Real change is more like steering a heavy ship. You turn the wheel and nothing happens for a while, and you wonder if it matters. Then, slowly, the horizon shifts. The next day I left work at a time that felt irresponsible. My hands actually shook as I drove home, like I was doing something forbidden. When I opened the front door, my daughter was on the floor with her paper airplane, yes, that same one, and she looked up, surprised, as if she didn't trust the universe enough to believe I'd returned early on purpose. I sat down on the carpet. I didn't even take off my shoes. I said, "Show me." She threw the airplane, and it wobbled and crashed, and we laughed, and she adjusted the wings and tried again. It was a small thing. It wouldn't impress anyone at the office. But it did something the office never did. It stitched me back into my own home. That's the part people miss. We think work only steals time, but it steals belonging. If you're always elsewhere, your life starts happening without you. People develop inside jokes you don't understand. They solve problems without calling you. They stop waiting for you to arrive. And then one day you feel lonely in a house full of people, and you don't know why. I'm telling you this because I can already hear the voice in your head pushing back. The voice that says, "If I don't grind, I'll fall behind." The voice that says, "This is what adults do." The voice that says, "I'll make it up later." Later is a fragile plan. Later depends on 1,000 things going right. It depends on your health holding steady. It depends on your relationships staying warm without firewood. It depends on time cooperating. Time never cooperates. Time is not your employee. Time is not impressed by your hustle. Time doesn't care about your calendar invites. It moves like a river moves, forward, without apology. So what do you do with this lesson, besides nod at it and go back to the same schedule tomorrow? You make your life smaller in one way so it can become bigger in another. And before you panic, I don't mean small like less meaningful. I mean small like less cluttered, less automatic, less driven by fear and appearances. You stop treating work as the only place you can prove your worth. Here are a few things I wish someone had told me when I was young enough to change more easily. First, decide what enough means. Not what your company wants. Not what your neighbor posts. Not what your parents expected. You. Enough money to sleep at night. Enough progress to feel proud. Enough effort to keep your integrity. Enough hours so you're not a ghost in your own home. If you don't define enough, work will define it for you, and it will set the number just out of reach forever. Second, schedule your people the way you schedule your meetings. I know it sounds unromantic. But romance isn't the point. Reliability is. Put dinner on the calendar. Put the walk on the calendar. Put the call with your friend on the calendar. You don't do that because relationships are chores. You do it because your life is busy and your heart deserves an appointment. Third, learn to be bored again. This might be the strangest advice, but it's real. Work addiction often lives in the fear of stillness. Stillness brings up feelings you've been outrunning, sadness, uncertainty, the question of whether you're living the right life. If you can't sit in silence without reaching for a task, you're not working, you're escaping. And when you stop escaping, you'll find out what you actually need. Fourth, watch for the moments when work is no longer about service or craft and becomes about ego. Ego is sneaky. It tells you you're indispensable. It tells you the world will collapse without you. It tells you you're the hero holding the roof up with your bare hands. That story feels good, until you realize you've been using it to justify neglect. I've met a lot of old men, especially, who carried that story right into retirement. They left the office, and the office barely noticed. That sounds harsh, but it's also freeing. You are not the only one. The machine keeps moving. The question is whether you kept moving with your family while it mattered. Fifth, tell the truth early. If your job is devouring your life, name it. Don't wait until resentment has teeth. Tell your boss what you can and can't do. Tell your partner what you're afraid of. Tell yourself what you're trading away. Honesty hurts less than regret, and regret is a pain that doesn't have a clean cure. Now I want to talk about something people rarely say out loud. Sometimes we work too much because we're lonely, or scared, or ashamed. Work becomes a place where the rules are clear. You show up, you perform, you get approval. Home is messier. People have feelings. They notice when you're distant. They want you, not your output. And that can be terrifying if you've built your identity on being useful. But you can learn. I learned slowly, clumsily, like an old dog learning a new path. I learned to sit at the table without trying to solve anything. I learned to ask questions and not hurry the answers. I learned that being loved is not the same as being praised. One afternoon, when I was in my 60s, my daughter, grown now, called me. She said, "Dad, do you remember the paper airplane?" I laughed. "Of course." She paused, and then she said, "I remember the night you came home early and sat on the floor. I remember thinking, oh, I matter." I had to pull the car over. I'm serious. A grown man on the side of the road, blinking hard, trying not to cry, because a memory that small had survived all those years like a pressed flower in a book. That's what you're building when you choose presence. Not a perfect life. Not a life without struggle. A life where someone can look back and find proof that they mattered to you. And here's the twist. The more present you become, the more work can become what it was meant to be. A contribution, not a cage. A tool, not a tyrant. You might even do better work, because you're not running on fumes. You're not trying to fill a hollow place with accomplishments. At 87, my world is quieter. I walk slower. I nap sometimes in the afternoon like a cat. I forget names and then remember them an hour later, usually at the worst moment. My body complains. But I have something I didn't earn in a conference room. I have people. I have a daughter who calls. I have a son who brings his kids over and lets me teach them silly card tricks. I have a neighbor who checks on me when the weather turns. I have a few friends left, and we talk about the past the way you talk about an old town you once lived in, fondly, with a little ache. If I could send one message back through time to my younger self, it would be this: stop trying to win a game that ends the same for everyone. Stop hoarding hours like they'll keep you safe. Spend them. Spend them on laughter. Spend them on dinners that run long. Spend them on walks where nothing gets accomplished except being alive together. Because one day you'll be sitting at a kitchen table, listening to the quiet, and the only thing that will matter is who you can call, and who will answer. Work has its place. So does ambition. But love, real, daily, imperfect love, has a deadline. And the deadline is closer than you think. So tonight, if you can, go home in whatever way home means for you. Put a hand on someone's shoulder. Look them in the eye. Be there. That's the kind of success you can still feel at 80. And if you don't have anyone nearby, start small, write the message, make the call, sit with yourself kindly. Presence begins the moment you stop running. Even one honest minute is a seed. Water it, and a life you recognize will grow back around you, quietly, like spring. You still have time, maybe not for everything, but for what matters.